follow-up show on the state of being of one Dr. Carlos Rivera, pediatrician, imprisoned for child support arrears. It is now 5 months that Dr. Carlos Rivera has been inside the Riverhead, Suffolk County, New York jail. We will be asking our guest of his current state. Our question to the viewing public: is jailing anyone for being behind in support what we want? Who is paying for that incarceration? And is this the right thing to do for any debt that is owed while that person is now unable to work while doing time? Should we add interest and penalty to that? I want everybody to think of that question. Finally, is it also right to psychologically imprison the extended family in that process? Because that is the unintended consequence. Okay, I have with me on this show Jamie Wagner, a friend of the jail Dr. Rivera, and to her left, Gary Jacobs, family law reformer. Thank you very much for showing up, these guys.
Thank you for having us.
We'd like you to bring us up to speed compared to, because we did this program only a month ago. If you'll tell us, is there anything new that you can add to where we were last time?
As of the last time, right after Carlos was incarcerated, I was able to get him a new attorney, and his new attorney was filing a writ of habeas corpus. We took that all the way up to the appellate division in the Supreme Court, and we lost that battle. And we lost that battle, according to his new attorney, because they are unwilling to place blame on his previous attorney. So right now what we're focusing on is his battle in the family court and again in Supreme Court. Family court, he has a petition for a downward modification while he's incarcerated. And in Supreme Court we have a plenary action to kind of renegotiate the entire settlement agreement. So,
you know, wasn't the ex receiving enough money before the downward modification attempt? What was the situation with how much money she was receiving? Just to remind the audience where we were.
She was, according to the settlement agreement, she was supposed to be receiving $15,000 per month in
say that
in
a
support.
Again, $15,000 a month.
Well, $15,000 a month total. That was $6,000 a month in child support, $3,000 a month in maintenance, and the additional amount was
and the audience should know that this amount was decided upon by Carlos.
Right.
On his own.
Absolutely.
And that it was above and beyond the statutory percentages. Am I right, Gary?
Right. I think he was trying to help. From what I understand, he was trying to help out. He wanted to do the best for his children. But I also believe that he was had bad representation, and he was also somewhat coerced into signing this agreement without going to trial, because if he went to trial, he had hanging over him the fact that he would lose his children. So I think you're not supposed to sign an agreement when you're under stress or under coercion. And I think in this case, when somebody's facing going to a trial where they may end up losing their children, you feel the pressure, and you're really not thinking. Anybody going through a divorce is not thinking clearly to begin with. Absolutely. Then you throw in the threat of possibly not seeing your children, and you say, you know what, I just want to get this over with. Everybody wants what's good for their children.
That's a lot of pressure.
And he ended up signing an agreement, from what I understand, under coercion. He also didn't have, from my understanding, proper or adequate legal representation, which is a problem because most of us have never used an attorney before, and you don't know what to expect. And by the time you do, you've already set the roadmap for where it's going, and it ends up being too late.
The FIT answer to that would be, what is proper when it comes to adjudicating a relationship?
Right.
What's fair, what's reasonable. It's going to change with every family. How you can codify that is beyond me. So he's been in for now 5 months, is that right?
Yes, 5 months.
And he's going to, next month in November, I think? Or?
November 15th.
Okay. What do you anticipate happening, other than being happy to have him out? How long
We'll be thrilled to have him out.
Yeah.
Well, the way I understand it, according to his attorney, is as soon as he comes home, he'll have to go directly to child support enforcement to try to make payment arrangements. Otherwise, they can continue to put him back in jail. So he would potentially have to go back to jail for 6 months because of the arrears that he has. And now the arrears are still, they're continuing to accrue.
Right.
And they also accrue 9% interest. So every month he gets a statement, which now is up to $224,000.
I think something, from what I understand, he's still getting served in jail, papers telling him that he's falling behind while he's in jail,
Yeah.
and also even the 9% interest to show you how
Right.
crazy it is.
Right.
Who gets guaranteed 9% interest in this economy?
Who's getting the 9% is
Not
another
the
thing.
children. The children are not getting that 9%. It's $924, I believe they said. $924 per month in interest that the state gets because
That-
his children aren't getting
So
that.
this is another way for the administrations, the government administration, Gary, is what I was talking about. What I fear the most is that this is just an acquisition of money. It's a confiscatory obligation that the agency has to acquire money from John Q. Public to satisfy its finances in keeping the operation going, so that more people can fall into this category, so the federal government can give them more money to continue the same process.
Absolutely.
It's one big continuous cycle, and the only fodder is you and I.
A lot of people don't understand that. They say, well, why would a court care how much you pay? It doesn't affect them. In reality, it actually does, because Child Support Agency is a huge agency, and you have the 9% interest. But what people also don't understand is you're paid behind when you go through the agency. So just for Dr. Rivera's $15,000 a month that he was putting in, the county was collecting interest. Now multiply that by the
Right.
thousands of people who are paying child support, that money that's held.
Sure.
There is a huge financial interest
Sure,
Because
by
the
the
state holds on
government.
to
by
that
the
for
government
6 to 8
to
weeks.
do this.
Sure, and they're taking it off of the backs of anybody who falls into that trap. It's like the fly falling into the spider trap. It's just a matter of time
Essentially,
before you
they
get
took
eaten up.
they took a man who was working full-time hours, probably about 60 hours per week.
You should
He
bring
was-
up to speed. He's a pediatrician.
He's a pediatrician. He was working and seeing patients, and he had his own solo
He had
practice.
his own business. And how many employees did he have?
We had 9
Go
employees
ahead.
at the time, myself included. I wasn't getting paid through the business at that time. And they took him and they incarcerated him right off the bat for 6 months. Now he's incarcerated. Now his business is bankrupt. There is no more
So what if-
pediatrician's
so the 9
office.
people that he did
So the
employ are no
9
longer
people
in work.
no longer
So the
employed.
9
They're
people have how
collecting
many family
unemployment.
members did they have?
Right.
The extent, the cyclical probability and the tentacles in this is can be very
So-
far-reaching.
So he and his children and his ex-wife all lost their health insurance. So now his ex-wife and his children are receiving Medicaid from the state. Carlos is receiving his medications from the state because he's incarcerated at this time. We have to pay, us as taxpayers, we have to pay for his food, shelter, clothing. You know, it doesn't make sense.
No,
This
there's-
was all
there's no
being paid
sense to it.
for
No.
by a man that was willing to work, that was looking to work to support his own children.
Right, so they took him away from every opportunity he had to provide for himself, which includes the children, you
Absolutely.
should remember, and now that's taken away.
And also, the rest of his life, if he decides to work in a hospital, or because now he's got to start all over again, his
He'll have-
application,
he'll
the
have-
first thing he's going to say, he's been imprisoned.
Have you ever had a sign on your head?
Yep, it's exact. His children, they have a father now who was imprisoned. It's embarrassing for a child to have their father
It's embarrassing for the father to even be in that
jail.
place.
It's,
to begin
it's
with,
embarrassing
yeah.
for everybody.
It is.
You really,
It's not a win. There's no win to be had except the only thing I can see is that the ex-wife is more handsomely endowed than she probably would have been had she stayed married, number one. Secondarily, and now she can make her own choices, so she can monopolize the kids. Alienation can now be a seed, right, going forward.
That's exactly what's happening. His
You haven't-
his oldest daughter refuses to speak with him. She hasn't spoken to him in over 5 months. His other 3 children, he can call 3 times a week. That's the arrangement that his ex-wife has made. He may call there 3 times a week when he's permitted to use the phone, because he is incarcerated. So it's not like he gets to decide when he can use the phone.
Right.
And she basically picks and chooses when she'll answer the phone. And when he does get to speak with his children, it's briefly, maybe once, twice a week. And most recently, his son was hospitalized. His son was hospitalized for a week, and his ex-wife never notified him. He found out from his son while he was on the phone with him.
I'm sure being a pediatrician, that
It
must
was
have had
horrifying.
an added stab in the back.
It was
To
horrifying.
know that you were out of the ability to do anything about your own child.
Yeah. And then his son ultimately had to go for surgery, and he had to endure that behind bars, unable to speak to anybody on the outside to find out how his son was doing. And the only one that can stop this at this point is her. She's the only one that can make a petition. She can bring a petition to the court to have him released, to return to work, to return to supporting his children. And she refuses.
I mean, that's, after the last show we did, a lot of people, saw the show and said, what is it that we can do? And like you just said, there is one way to resolve this right out of the box. And if his ex-wife would come to her senses and say, you know what, this isn't good for anybody. Maybe I feel good, but it's not good for our children. It's just, the damage is done. But you know what? She can stop it. She can go to court and have it done. Really, I like, we're here putting blame on the system, and the system allowed this to happen. But his ex-wife, really, she should not be held harmless, because she could stop this all along. It's, what she's doing to me, that in my opinion, she's not a fit mother for allowing this children's father to be incarcerated. That tells me that she's not a fit mother.
She's a co-conspirator in his ineffectiveness. He can't do anything about it, so she's assisting in diminishing and reducing his ability to do anything.
I mean, she could stand back and say, well, the courts did it, and maybe she can justify it that way. The courts didn't do it. She's the one who took him to court. She could have agreed to this.
Let's say
the magistrate actually asked her, I'm asking you, do you actually want him incarcerated? And she said yes. And that is exactly what happened.
Well, that's a payback. That's an emotional payback.
What doesn't make sense is why are we allowing the ex-wife or the ex-spouse, whether it's an ex-wife or an ex-husband, why are we allowing them to make that decision? That empowerment should not go to them.
It's a big question that could be answered by nobody else other than the government itself, because that's where it's laid out. It's laid out to have that opportunity to provide in law access to punishment through one spouse against another, right?
Well, they thrive off the system. If she would say, you know what, let's let him go and do the best he can to pay. Well, what happens now? The law guardian doesn't have a job, and there's less people in the jail to support them, and that whole support mechanism. So they don't mind that she's doing this. They're helping her do it.
Yeah, see, that's all cyclical. That's what we were talking about before. It's all going to feed itself back into the system.
But when people see this show, and by the time it comes out, maybe he will be out of prison. But I would hope that there are some people who know the situation and would call her up and try to appeal to her senses as a mother, that you don't want your children being incarcerated, your children's father. It's a stigma that they'll have their whole life, that their father was put away in jail.
It's part of another show we're going to do about that subject, but the stigma, what you're referring to, is much more pervasive in our society. You can see it in some of the younger adults. We're going to do this next. That they don't balance the equation out when someone's divorced in the family or jailed and apprehended in some way or called a deadbeat. There's all kinds of punitive measures that a court system can apply that are extended. Now, how many kids does he have again? 4?
Carlos has 4 and I have 2.
Oh, nice.
So there's 6 of us.
Half a dozen.
Six
so
of
what are
them
the
together.
ages of the people?
Carlos's children range from age 6 to 16. So he has a 6-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 16-year-old. I have a 10-year-old, and well, she'll be 11 this month. I have an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old at home.
So how are they dealing with it? These are your kids and not the father.
My children adore Carlos, and they miss him terribly. They speak to him every night before bed, because he is able to call most times before bed. So they do get to speak with him every night. They write him letters, which I think may be harder for him, because he hears from my children more than he hears from his own.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
It's heartbreaking, you know. And my daughter's 11th birthday is coming up next week, and she's missing her stepfather.
Yeah.
Terribly.
And Chris, people watching the show, I think the question is, everyone's going to be outraged. I would think in the last show there was a lot of outrage. A lot of people see the show. It gets posted on YouTube. What can people do to help this situation? Because we don't want him to go back into jail again and create this, and to change the system.
What the thing that I always point to that could change everything, but most people don't do it, is civil disobedience. That is the way to do it. You march and protest with a lot of people at your local politician's office. Gary, I'm sure you're going to be hearing about this subject before.
Protests with Americans for Legal Reform. And
right.
We did
but you have to do it with a bigger group of people, all the people that can possibly get online with you and protest. And it would have to be with a voice, so the television gets there, so the media gets there. This is your first step into that area. And if this program works well, I'm hoping that we can get this to bigger outlets and you can get the exposure you need, because that's what anyone that's in this kind of desperate situation really needs. They need exposure.
Well, that's what I would ask anybody who is watching the show. and you're watching it, if you're watching it on TV, look on YouTube.
On YouTube, right.
And share it on your Facebook page, email it out to people, because there's a saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
That's right.
And although it is the best disinfectant, it doesn't work as good as bleach, which would be bringing in a prosecutor and taking care of the problem. Sunlight takes a while to fix the problem, and if everybody shares it, you don't know who's going to see it, that it's going to strike a chord. They're going to say, you know what, enough is enough. We can't let this happen. Maybe it's a politician, maybe it's a famous actor who sees it and had this happen to them. Somebody needs to see it. So anybody who's watching this show, I think we really need them to share this.
It's up
and
to us
get
to
the
be.
message
It's
out.
up to us to be leaders, Gary, in this area, because we know what goes on behind the scenes. Even somebody who would watch the program wouldn't know as much as we do. So it's up to us to lead them to the place where the most effective result would be. And hopefully, as you said, I hope we do clamor to get something to happen, and I hope we can, produce a program that'll fly through and make that work. He's pretty much in a bad situation now regarding a new business, right? You had tried to get a new business up and running, but now he's broke to try to put money into it?
Yeah, there's his business, it was struggling from the beginning. And with him being incarcerated, we had no other physician, we had no other nurse practitioner to keep it going.
You should state also that I think he had to borrow, correct me if I'm wrong, had to borrow money to get
this original practice started. We borrowed
Right.
over $140,000 from patients and friends.
So you have to borrow money to restart your life again, whereas you're paying out monthly, which would have...
Right. Well, of that $140,000 that we borrowed from patients and friends in 2009 to start the business, $70,000 of it went to satisfy his settlement. It went directly to satisfy his monthly obligations towards his ex-wife and his children, which nobody was complaining about. We were intent on trying and making sure that everybody was okay.
Yeah.
All along intent on
So
trying.
every step of the way you're responsible.
Trying.
Yeah.
Absolutely trying. His effort never faltered. He was always...
It just kills me to hear that somebody can, completely be depleted, which is basically just the whim of one person, of the other party.
And he had a lot of, he wasn't just a regular physician. And, people who saw the last show, people contacted me through Facebook, and there was people who were telling me how he did house calls and took care of their children and worked all hours of the night. And in fact, when all his money was gone and he was incarcerated, it was his patients who helped put money together to hire another attorney to try to get him out of jail. And that speaks a lot for his character.
That's exactly
of this man, that people were willing to, things are tight, that they were willing to reach into their own pocket and say, we need him out of jail, because there aren't many people like him. This is a special man. He's not your average guy. He was, and that's probably why he's in trouble too. If he would have just stuck to his guns and said, hey, I'm going to trial and I'm going to fight and I'm going to pay the minimum that I have to pay, he didn't, because he's an extraordinary person who wanted the best for everybody. As a physician, that's what you get into it.
And he's willing to go above and beyond the statutory percentages, which obviously is a mistake. Everyone should know.
In hindsight, it was a mistake.
Everyone should know.
You can always give more than what you're ordered to give by the court.
Right.
On your own, but you can't allow the court to determine that, and the court will automatically determine what you give if it's more than the percentage, that is the amount that you can pay. It sets it in
That's
motion.
exactly what we were very naive about. When she brought him to family court, both of us thought, well, okay, anybody can look at this and see that you couldn't afford this agreement, that you tried. And that if they looked at the numbers, that the $190,000 that you made per year, if they even took that was what you were making at your peak. If they took those numbers and then calculated what you would have been obligated to pay based on that high number, they would see that you paid out more. Maybe it wasn't what you agreed to, but you paid out more than what you would have been obligated to pay.
The system takes the position, it takes the position that what you've paid is what you can afford. If you paid the whole 190, they would take it.
Yeah. We always counsel
wouldn't
people.
matter. It wouldn't matter.
When you're doing an agreement, never agree to something that you can't afford to pay, because it'll come back. Even if he's like you do what he did, would try to stretch it.
Most
That's
people don't
another
know
interesting
that.
fact. How does he's a physician. He's an educated man. I'm a nurse. I'm an educated woman. I still couldn't tell you what I could afford to pay out and what I couldn't afford to pay out. So when they're making these deals, shouldn't they have somebody that comes in and says, hey, wait a minute,
Sounds like too much common sense to me, Jamie.
You can't afford this.
No, it's just too much common sense. To look at somebody fairly, individually, is the way that we all expect to be treated. That's what happened to me. I mean, I went through the same exact thing. They went to way beyond what I needed to afford in the same fashion.
And you can't use a flat number because it doesn't take into consideration. Maybe you have no mortgage on a house,
right?
And then you can afford this big number. Or maybe
Right.
you just refinanced or bought a new house, and there's no way you can afford that number. You really need to
Or
look.
you remarry and you have new obligations to the new family, and there's no consideration for the new family. You can't have a second family with the application of a child support award in the first divorce. That sounds crazy, but that's exactly how they treat it. You are capable of paying the percentage you have and where you left off, trying to equalize the position of the children in a family, which is an impossible reality. It's in the language of the debate on the floor debate. I read all the floor debate. It's unbelievable.
You know, and in real life, if he were to go into his own practice, if they were still married, and he made less money, you know,
She would have to
deal with less money.
Yeah,
You know,
hello.
there's just not the
You
pie is
wouldn't be
only
able to put somebody in
Right.
jail for making less money.
the pie is only so big, and you take away these. You know, now you have two households. There's the standard of living is going to have to go down, or his ex-wife can go out
There's
and
an
get a job.
assumption, they assume, and it's in the paperwork, it's also in the debate, the child support enforcement thinks that there's money available to you that they can't identify. So they automatically assume a higher number rather than a lower number.
Right.
I mean, it's always going to be higher. It's always going to be higher than you think it is, too. Okay, we only got about 2 minutes left. I'd like you to do me a favor and tell me a little bit about his state. I understand he lost some weight. And what about his medical license? Just carry those two things through it.
His medical license is still up in the air. They are still, child support enforcement is still looking to suspend not only his driver's license now, but his medical license. That is something that when he gets out, we will continue to fight. He has lost nearly 60 pounds in 4.5 months. He is incarcerated with gang members, drug dealers, drug addicts, and he has been threatened.
Criminals.
Yeah, he has been threatened by a gang member, and that was emotionally trying for both of us.
And Jamie, you have a website also that, if you mention the website, to support him, so if anybody wants to help out.
It's www.justice4carlos.com.
And they can also Google Dr. Carlos Rivera, and these shows will be available on YouTube or FIT TV, and they can get it that way. And again, everybody please share it, go to your representatives, and get the message out that this needs to be made right. We need to fix the system.
Not just for Carlos, but for anybody else that's moving forward. You know, if 50% of marriages end in divorce, any one of us can find ourselves in this position.
Right, I keep telling people, don't expect that the perfectly normal relationship that you have can't be drawn asunder by a simple divorce. Everyone thinks, oh, I just want to get away from wherever it is I am. They don't recognize how much pain that they could be in. This is only one example, by the way, right, Gary? Aren't there many others that are like this? We only have half a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we have, this is one example, but I get contacted every week. He's in there with other people that are in the same situation. He's in there with court officers who have been in the same situation. It's more tragic because he was such a good member of society, but he's not alone. This isn't an unusual story. It's just more glaring because you're doing it to a physician.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you very
you.
much, Gary. And it's the website again, real quick, is
www.justice4carlos.com.
Thank you very much. It's incredible. I hope somebody does something about this. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own. You'd never be able to see this in the newspaper because it would expose them. We intend to do this every single week, and we always invite all opposing views. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you very much for watching FIT TV, and I'll see you again next week.
Your generous support has made it possible for United Way to help build strong communities across America for over 100 years. Thank you. Now more than ever, it's crucial that we maintain the strength and vitality of our neighborhoods, towns, and cities. United Way is active in local communities 365 days a year, making a measurable difference in the lives of Americans. Helping local communities identify pressing issues and opportunities and committing the resources necessary to address them. United Way helps to strengthen America one community at a time. Your local United Way has relied on your generous support for years. Your community is counting on you. Please continue to support your local United Way. Strong communities mean a stronger America.